Hello, welcome to everybody. Thank you very much for joining Flying 180 Motorsports for another segment in our interview series. As everyone knows by now, it's my goal to touch upon every slice of the motorsports industry from around the world. Many different people involved in making everything tick, and the passion for motorsports runs deep and goes far all across the globe. Um, I'm, I'm very excited to share my next guest with the viewers because it's going to be a lot of fun. I've been looking forward to this, and this is going to be a real rip because I know this is going to touch the roots and touch the childhood and touch the adulthood. It's going to touch everything um, that has a piece of motorsports in each and every one of us. So, what I'm going to do is introduce our guest. Uh, Welcome to Paul from Diecast Addicts. How are you, Paul?
Hey, yeah, great. Thanks, Chris, and thank you for having me on the show.
Absolutely, absolutely, my pleasure. Paul, as always, please tell us what part of the world are you located?
So I'm in the UK. I live just outside of London, near a little town called Ascot, which has a very famous horse racing course. So if for people who know, so that's about a mile from my house. But yeah, the southeast of England.
Very nice, very nice. And to all our viewers live on Periscope, feel free to any comments, questions. Please feel free to submit, and we'll try to address them. Okay, Paul, I have your title as a model car collector. Um, when would you say that that title became appropriate to attach to you?
Uh, Unofficially, probably from less than a year old. Officially, when I became aware and yeah, I had a lot of small sort of matchbox cars. I mean, my grandma used to buy me a matchbox car every single week when she came to visit. So you could say I was a very lucky kid. It just meant that I had a few hundred by the time I was probably about five. And then it was a friend of my father's who collected models of yesteryear, actually, who I remember him having a cabinet full of these things which were not played with. And he said, you've got to keep your cars nice. So, here's me looking at a pile of smashed up, crashed up cars, some of which were still nice, others which were, yeah, played with a lot and well loved. And yeah, and then I started to think a little bit more about collecting a bit more seriously. So I would say maybe from about the age of 8 or 9, I would probably buy cars, maybe still play with them, but try and keep them as nice as I possibly could. And then obviously by the time you get to be an adult and, we can drive at 17 over here in the UK. And, I grew up in the late 70s and early 80s, and there was a lot of cars around which were suddenly available to us as teenagers. So, yeah, so the passion then moved to real for cars. And then I think eventually you end up going back to models purely because I don't think you can ever own every single car that you've had a passion about. So you tend to like go the miniature route instead.
Now, tell me about your passion for motorsports. How did that grow? Did that grow from just your your growing of your car collection, model car collection, or did that exist prior to the cars starting to build up?
I think I'm just I've always been into cars, anything automotive. So when I was growing up in the UK in the 70s, we only had three TV channels, but on a Saturday there used to be a program called World of Sport on one of the commercial channels, and that used to occasionally show motorsport. So you'd get rallying or rallycross. Uh, Obviously, they show things like the Formula One. My father took me to a few races at where I grew up, a local racetrack called Cadwell Park, where I saw Formula Ford, and then also things like you'd see saloon car racing, but not necessarily British touring cars, but you'd get sort of a lot of cars that you'd see on the road every day, where people would just turn up and race them. So I guess it came more from TV and an exposure that way, but then also, yeah, just visiting racetracks and getting excited about seeing cars that you saw in the road just racing. It's sort of it was normal and natural for me to grow up watching cars that I knew every day, sort of going around the racetrack.
Right.
So
Excellent. For the viewers out there, this, and for you, Paul, as we know, you have so much to share, and a little tricky to prepare for talking with you today because it's almost like it's going to be unfair in a sense that we're not going to be able to show everything. So
yeah,
what I like to do is get right into the graphics and put us on a screen where we're going to be able to not only show your cars, but we can start discussing some of this and move through the collection and start discussing the collection a little bit.
yeah. I think it's worth noting as well. I mean, cars are a wide subject. Racing is a wide subject. I think my passion, any race cars that I've got or motorsport related cars have come from sort of where, like I was saying before, where I've come from with my car collecting, maybe my car ownership. So for example, I don't collect Formula One cars, for example.
Right.
For me, cars are more the tangible reality of cars that you would drive every day, or
Right.
hybrid versions of those, let's say. So, yeah.
Okay. So let me put this on the screen now. And we're going to start off right here. And please tell our viewers what we're looking at here.
Okay, so you're looking at, from left to right, Escort, Ford Escort Mark I's built between 1968 and 1974/5. Motorsport versions of, so on the far left, the blue one is a 1968 Ford Escort twin cam, which was a follow-on to the Lotus Cortina, a similar engine of 1600cc capacity, belt-driven Lotus engine. But the Cortina was competitive on the track. The Escort became synonymous and superbly, competitive on from a rallying perspective. And I think, one could argue it's the greatest rally car ever built. It was just a small, compact British saloon, which was just perfectly balanced, rear-wheel drive, stick a decent size, powerful engine in it, and you had a car that was, a successful rally car for at least 10 years after that. And as we all know, Ford have got a sporting heritage. The middle car, Ford Escort Mexico, with in the Mark I guise, was a 1600 Kent engine in that. That was actually built in commemoration of the previous car winning the 1970 Mexico Rally. So Ford sort of spun off a limited edition, and that particular car, I've got it here actually. If you can see this is a Corgi do a Vanguard's version of that, which is really awesome. And they do various. I mean, the cool thing about Corgi is that and Vanguards is they make various color variations and trim variations of all their cars. So, that one's sort of red with the Mexico stripes. I've got another one here in a box, which is Sebring red without the stripes, but with the 4 spotlights on the front. You can, as a collector, unfortunately, when you're an addict like I am, you then have to have every single version, of course. Right. The final version is the first version of the Escort RS2000, which was very successful, not in rallying, but more in touring cars. So that had the 2-litre Pinto engine in it, and the white one there, that's the Mark I version of the Escort RS2000. Here you've got both the Mark I and Mark II Mexico. So the green car is again a Vanguard's version of the RS Mexico, which was a 1600cc overhead cam Pinto unit of about 95 horsepower, same engine that they used in Capris and Cortinas over here, but more powerful version. And interestingly, the RS 1800, which was the successor to the early twin cam Escorts, BDA Escorts, was based on this car. So you're talking about a stiffened Rally Sport body shell, all built by this point, not in the UK anymore at the AVO factory, but these were all built in Germany. but the
Right.
Mexico was an exclusive version just for the UK, the RS Mexico.
Uh,
Um,
uh,
only 2,200 ever built between 1976 and 1978.
and what is the scale of these cars?
These are 143rd.
Okay.
So, I mean, you can see here, we're talking maybe
Yeah.
three and a bit inches long. Pretty heavy, metal base. And they retail for about maybe 20, 25 pounds new.
Yeah.
But obviously they released them over a number of years. So, I mean, the red one is no longer available. That was probably last actually available in the shops probably about 15 years ago. So,
Right.
eBay is a collector's friend.
You just touched upon the fact that there's a metal base there, and that was one of the questions I had. Is if we were to try to differentiate the value of the cars that not only we're looking at now, but as we continue to look through these, where does the value lie in these cars when you're looking to buy a quality model car? Is it in the paint that's used? Is it in the metal that's used? Is it in the process? Tell me where does the value lie?
You want a model car to be an accurate representation of the real thing. So, I mean, what do I mean by that? If you look back to say, Matchbox cars or Corgi cars or dinky toys of the 60s and 70s and maybe even into the 80s, you got a good representation of. In fact, some manufacturers did better than others. I mean, Dinky were pretty good at getting pretty accurate scale models, but cars that we all used to race as kids, like Hot Wheels and things like that, were
Right.
maybe more of not such a true representation of. But that's not so important when when you're a child. I think when you become a collector, you want something that's a much truer representation. So the value for me comes in the accuracy of not only the scale and the proportions and how it looks, but also probably the colors and the trim levels, and we're talking about striping and all that sort of stuff. It needs to be something that's a true representation of what you remember the actual vehicle looking like. And I think nowadays with modern manufacturing techniques, they're just getting better and better and better. So the tempo printing is done laser printed, and they can get it down to minute detail
Yeah.
accuracy of exactly how it would have been on the real vehicle, versus obviously when we were kids growing up, you probably remember, you early tempos were, I mean, this isn't a race car, but this is a 1971 release Corgi Camaro here, where
Yeah,
there's
show
actually
that to the camera a little bit more, like right in the
there's
center.
painted tempo on the front of that, which is actually quite rare for the time. And
Yeah.
this is a really, really rare Corgi model, actually, this one. But, normally you get Matchbox putting stickers on cars and things were maybe a little bit less accurate and not accurate at all, but we didn't care as kids. You just bought, cars would used to send down the track or play outside with or whatever. You smash them up and, well, they were pretty indestructible, actually. But, you know what I'm saying? I think when you become an adult collector, it becomes a lot more about the true representation of the actual vehicle.
Right. Now, do you find that quality models are being developed and manufactured or even created, not manufactured, but are being created in certain parts of the world? Like, do you say, oh, okay, the only cars from Italy or Germany are the quality ones, or like
That,
do certain
yeah, that,
regions of the world producing better quality models than others?
that's a really, really good question. It depends how, well, again, it depends what you mean by quality. Quality can mean how it's manufactured. Quality could mean the detail in it. So, um, Italy, I think, have produced quality detail models for years. If you think about Burago and even some of the Martoys models which came before that, they were very, very accurate in a proportion and detail perspective, but probably quite cheaply made. When I say that, I mean that they were just basically a chassis, a plastic interior, a body and wheels, and there's probably like 10 component parts or less to the whole vehicle. I
Right.
think nowadays, if you look at, say, I mean, Corgi are a UK company who do van cards. All the models are built in China. I mean, another one, Mini Champs, which this is a Paul's Model Art. I believe they're a German company. I'm not entirely sure where these are manufactured actually, but it's minichamps.de or made in China again. Quality manufacturer. But these Mini Champs ones are very, very, very collectible and very, very detailed. You're probably talking double the price of a Corgi Vanguard for a mini champs, and they're very, very limited, like to 1,000 or 1,500 models worldwide.
So you mentioned two things here. One is the limited availability and the detail, right?
Yeah.
So between the two, which is more valuable?
Uh, it really does depend. I mean, I'd say first of all the detail, but when I get a sniff of something that's really quite limited and rare, I think you sort of get on one where you've got to find that model and have it. Sometimes when they first come out, they're easy to obtain because they're brand new. And I mean, myself, I've got a friend in Scotland, Lee, who also collects model cars, and we will sort of like be on a lot of the diecast pages waiting for models to come out, and you can put in pre-orders and get those cars early. Other ones you'll find you discover quite by accident by doing a search. So you might be searching for a particular car or just doing some research on a car, and it'll pop up and you'll think, I never realized that manufacturer made that car. And then you go on, you start searching for it, and it might be readily available, or it might be really quite hard to get hold of, and then it just becomes a mission, if it's one that you want, to actually obtain that model.
I think you see where I'm kind of maybe going with that is, if you have a high detail car, but it's produced in high numbers, but then you have a low detail car that maybe because of the model that they're building, it's such a rare version of a certain car, but the detail is maybe as great, but it's lower numbers and limited. How do you weigh that, like, in your head?
I think it just comes down to personal choice and preference. Yeah. I mean, like I said, so we're talking about motorsports today, but so some of the cars, I mean, I've got some I can show you in a minute, which are very, very highly precision made, limited quantity, and hard to get hold of. But there's one particular Alfa Romeo that I wanted purely because of its rarity and high detail. Equally, I showed you before, not a race car, but this Corgi model here, this Camaro, was made for only 1 year with the whiz wheels in this color. This is one of the rarest Corgi models you can get.
Yeah.
Boxed. I mean, I got another one over the weekend. It's coming from New Zealand, actually. It cost me £122, which is about $150, because of its rarity in this condition. This one was about 60 about 2 years ago. I used to have this as a kid. I've still got it smashed up at my parents', not knowing how rare this car was. I can actually remember them buying it for me. Years later, it's like, I need to replace that now, because the realization that you had something which not many other people have got. So it becomes a mission to replace it versus something else which you really, is really rare. And it's you track it down because you know of the detail and the rarity of it.
And we're going to get back to some of the pictures that we're passing through right now, but I'm so curious. I love talking to you. You touched upon just now, you said you had a car. That car obviously was smashed up a little bit, from earlier ownership. But does the hobby and does the market for car collecting allow for the reconditioning of a car that you may find it in the attic of a parent's house somewhere that you haven't seen in 50 years? I mean, does it allow for the reconditioning of a model?
So I don't recondition models. I don't restore them. And I mean, there's a lot of people that I follow and follow me on Twitter who are superb at restoration. And you'll find that some people will buy beat up stuff and then completely, they'll either restore it back to original spec, or they might change the wheels, the color and whatever, and like make it a hybrid. And we're talking everything from like small Hot Wheels models up to sort of larger 118. I mean, I followed one guy in Scotland on Facebook who, LSM Motors, if anybody is interested, look him up on Facebook. He actually chops cars up and makes versions of the car which was never available from a model. So, for example, he'll make a saloon car out of a hatchback or a van, and they look exactly like what they would have done had they been a produced model. And it's like, some people have become obsessive about what they build. he's massively into rally cars as well. So I think some of the pictures I sent you for this
Mm-hmm.
chat with Opel Mantas and things like that, so from the rally era, and he'll completely take a standardized sort of rally model and make it something that was never produced. I've not got the skills for that. I mean, for me, I try and buy the best condition I possibly can. Again, it all comes down to the availability and rarity. And I've passed models up before and waited for a good one. And I think you've just got to be patient sometimes.
Right.
And it depends on what you're collecting. So, I collect a lot of modern stuff. And when I say modern, I mean modern manufactured, as well as modern era cars. But I've also, I tend to now collect things that I maybe missed or didn't know about, or maybe wasn't even interested in as a child. But then you sort of go back and you look through all these old catalogs, and you get on these websites and people start talking about it. You think, oh yeah, I remember those in the shops back in the 70s, and try and track one down. And I mean, I've waited 2 years for one that I've really been interested to come up, and then obviously it's the thrill of the chase then when you're on an eBay auction trying to win it.
Right.
And sometimes I set a limit, and I just think, okay, I'll let that one go, and there'll be something else to come along. I mean, it all depends on
Right.
your mood at the time, maybe how many glasses of wine you've had on a Friday night as well.
Right.
Might dictate how brave you get on an eBay auction.
Yeah. Paul, let me ask you a question here. We're looking at the Escort rally car.
That's the Focus, yeah. That's the Colin McRae car, yeah.
I apologize. The Focus. I apologize.
Yeah.
Is the accuracy of the livery as key to the value as all the detail of the physical car?
I would say value to a collector, yeah. Value to the actual model, I think it depends how detailed you are. I mean, some people may say things like, oh, that Valvoline logo wasn't exactly like that on there. I mean, that's not me. For me, it's more the representation of the vehicle itself. Right. I know we've shown a lot of Fords here, and I don't just collect Fords, but Fords are a big part of British, well, global, but particularly British sporting history when you're talking about rallying.
Right.
And cars that we would see every day. So, I mean, an RS Focus is something that you could buy on the street, and obviously you grow up watching these cars race on TV, and Colin McRae was an absolute hero.
Yep.
So, that is a pretty true representation of the car that him and Grist drove. And I mean, that was a Corgi model, 1/43rd scale. I've got that in a box in my office behind me.
Right.
Obviously I took it out to photograph here, but yeah, this is one that for not much, I think I got that for, wow, that might have been £6, £7, £8. Pretty readily available. Corgi ever do multiple versions, so you can get that car in all sorts of livery, various different drivers. For me, the fact that it was the McRae car, and I mean, obviously Colin McRae was a hero, drove for Ford and Subaru, etc. He's now unfortunately no longer with us. I mean, that for me, it's more the fact that that's the McRae car than the fact that it's the Focus, really. So, yeah.
You mentioned you keep referring to, you have the cars in the box.
Yeah.
Tell us from a collector standpoint how much that means to a collector and other collectors to know that a model car exists in a box rather than out of the box.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously the box helps protect it, obviously, but I've got some cars. I mean, for example, I took my 118 scale Ascona 400 out to photograph for you in the week so that we could talk about cars here. That's the first time I bought the car 10 years ago that it's ever been out of the box. Oh, it still had the cellophane wrappers around the middle to stop the doors open, the bonnet and stuff. And it was, why did I keep it like that? Probably because I'm mainly retentive, but will I ever sell it? No. So really it probably should be out on display, but it's important that I think you still retain the original packaging. And again, it depends. I mean, collecting old Corgi and Matchbox models, if they're in the original box, extremely desirable. Yeah, absolutely. It's a part of history, and it's also a part of your childhood, and it's a part of having something that you either lost or broke or whatever, and your parents threw the box away probably as soon as you opened it. It went straight in the bin. So finding things like that is good. And I think the fact we've got the internet to thank for that, nothing can get away anymore. It just depends, things are now worth what we're prepared to pay for them. So
right.
Yeah.
Tell us about this car.
Okay, so that's a match. Actually, that's a Matchbox 136 scale model of a Steve Soper Sierra RS 500.
Hmm.
Big battles at the time between him and Andy Rouse from Rouse Sport. The Sierra Cosworth was, a significant car in touring car racing as well as rallying towards the end of the 80s. And yeah, is now a very, very sought after performance car. I mean, Ford's price of hot Fords in Europe have gone through the roof. I mean, these were
Right.
cars that were throwaway cars that you smashed up as teenagers or in our younger days. And yeah, but now represent the reason why I think we know and love motorsport and we love Fords. So this is the only version of this particular Texaco livery car that I've got. But I mean, I think if anybody looks out there, there's probably much more detailed models than this. This was available. I got this in a box. This was probably less than £10.
Right.
Never been out of the box. I took it off its plinth for the first time in 30 years to photograph this one for you.
With model cars of all sizes, obviously you buy a car, it could be even a Matchbox car or whatever
Yeah,
kind of car that you want. And you would expect that you buy it, you take it out of the box, you want to check it out, the doors open, maybe
yeah,
the hood opens,
yeah.
maybe the trunk opens. But what's the most detail that you've seen in a car? Like you've looked at it and you've said, oh my God, the glove box opens. Like that's crazy. Like something that's blown your mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of high-end stuff. Mini Champs do some really high-end stuff. Nothing of this smaller scale like this. I mean, this is the Cosworth there you're showing me. That's the
Hmm.
1/4 Vanguard Moonstone Blue Cosworth.
That's
These
nice.
have got quite detailed interiors. You probably can't see that there, but there's nothing that opens on them.
Okay.
I think they want to keep production costs down, so it's more about the detail. But yeah, I mean, I've got uh, there was an American manufacturer called Ertl or ERTL used to do some big 1/18 scale American cars. I've got a few of those. They stopped producing, and I think both Greenlight and Auto World took on their castings. I've got a Charger. It's actually a movie car from the film Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry, of the lemon Charger that was in that. You flip it over, and the rear wheels drive the diff and the drive shaft and everything. I mean, we're talking a lot of money for these models, like over 100
Wow.
to like $120 from new. I mean, obviously they're very limited. So then and when they go out of production, then they get, they become more expensive. But yeah, I mean, there's some detail like that is pretty incredible. Um,
Yeah.
but you got to pay for it,
Yeah.
and you got to have the space to display it, obviously. So
Is it safe to say that the detail in a model increases with the scale of the car, meaning like the larger the car, the more detail, or does the value of a car, like if you get a smaller car that has more detail, which maybe is against the norm for a smaller car, does that drive the value up on that? I guess the detail is one of those driving value factors, right?
So you're talking about value to the collector, as in value interest or value money?
Let's say value. It's a good question. I would say value to the dollar amount, to what the value of the car is to purchase. So if you have a smaller car, do you tend to see less detail? And because of that, if you do see a greater detail, smaller car, does that
Yeah,
the value of
I,
that go up?
I guess. I mean, it all depends on. I mean, obviously, manufacturing techniques. So if somebody's going to produce a low quantity, it's going to be more money, right? So,
Right.
uh, yeah. Whereas more mass production, I mean, there's some pretty. I think the bigger the scale, there's the opportunity to put in a lot more detail. But I find now, I mean, 143 is a popular size scale for collectors for a number of reasons. Obviously, they're easy to display, they're easy to store. But going back to what I was saying, I think with modern manufacturing techniques for both plastics and metals and paint, you can get some really, really cool detail in miniature now, which actually looks more realistic. I mean, if if you look on some of the photographs I've taken and put on my Twitter page,
Yeah.
some people will comment on, they can't believe it's a 1/43rd scale car. Although, then there's obviously the bigger scale you go. I mean, if I take this 118 Otto models
Wow.
Opel Commodore, for example, right? So
That's really nice.
this is highly high. This is actually resin. It's not die cast. It's very heavy. When I photographed this,
Wow.
it looks like the real thing. I mean,
Yeah.
this is absolutely awesome. I'm an Otto Club collector, so I actually got this at collector club prices, but now, you'll be hard pressed to pay under £100 for that. And that model has only been out about three months. So that, that is the most detailed 118 scale model you can get. It's not supposed to be played with. It's supposed to be displayed. I've got nowhere to display that at the moment, actually. As soon as this is over, that will go back in its polystyrene casing until I get a cabinet to put it in. Whereas, other things like, I showed the Escorts before, these I got this one
Right.
cheap, wasn't in its box. It's in perfect condition. It
Right.
sits on a shelf with a bunch of other stuff,
Right.
occasionally gets dusted if it gets dirty. But I still, it's still valuable to me because it represents something that I grew up with when I was a kid. So
Right. Tell me about the paint on the 1/18th scale car you just showed. Tell me
yeah,
about the paint. Are we talking about multiple layers of paint now with a clear coat on top, like a real car?
yeah. I mean, this is really highly detailed. I mean, you can't even begin to imagine. It doesn't have any opening features, which is probably good because that means they can get the shut lines and all that sort of stuff down to absolute, accuracy. I mean, even the badging on the back is just
Yeah.
so accurate. You'd think you were looking at the real thing.
That's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's the reason they're so expensive is because of the limited quantity and the fact of the high level of detail and finish that goes into it, and the accuracy in the badging and the interior and the wheels and everything. So yeah.
Paul, tell me about this bad boy we're looking at.
So 1969 Charger Daytona, as everybody knows, built to win NASCAR. 68 Charger became 69, and they first of all had the Charger 500, which was a more sort of flush aerodynamic version of the coupe, and then they decided to go with a big rear wing. I mean, funnily enough, it's funny, all these different manufacturers who caused controversy in racing. I think this was probably one of the ones that everybody remembers back in the late 60s, followed by the Plymouth Superbird in 1970, basically the same car, just
Right.
a homologated car to go racing. Actually, not that successful on the dealership floors. They couldn't actually sell them once. When back in the day, although obviously now, I mean, if these are worth $100,000, $200,000, $300,000 for a concours one.
Yeah.
But yeah, this is an Ertl model. I would say, as detail goes, I mean, I have had this one maybe 20 years. It's still in its box. It's acceptable for its level of detail. You could be really picky and scrutinize it. The paint finish isn't great.
Right.
Fittings of it, but it's a what do you want for a $20 car? Nowadays, Auto World do these. You're talking probably triple, quadruple the price for the same casting, but with super, super high detail. And that's, collectors are demanding that. I think collectors are demanding higher and higher accuracy, and that all comes down to personal taste. I collect what I like at the end of the day, and it doesn't matter whether it's accurate or not. It all depends on maybe the rarity of it, or just something, like I said, that I've said before, that I missed when I was a child, perhaps.
Paul, what percentage of your collection of the cars you collect would you say you purchase new compared to what you purchase or trade or swap with another collector?
Well, it depends when you say new. New might mean that it's 20 years old and never been out of the box, right? So
I would say direct from the manufacturer.
um, nowadays, not many. Maybe 5%, maybe less. The wonder and beauty of eBay means that you can you can track stuff down that is still as new, but is probably no longer available.
Right.
And that makes collecting an obsession. It makes it exciting. It also makes it very, very easy. All of those rolled into one. And a lot of these things are only available mail order nowadays anyway. So
Right.
I remember that this Daytona though is quite an interesting one. I think I remember tracking that down 20 years ago when I lived in West London. There was a hardware store that also sold die-cast models. It was bizarre, and they had a pile that he was getting rid of cheap. And it was one of them. I bought maybe 4 or 5, and
Right.
I couldn't believe my luck. I mean, I got this lot of cars, maybe 4 or 5 for about £50, and this was one of them.
Wow.
So sometimes it's just you just get lucky, you know.
Well, based on that story, let's say, well, let's hear how far out of your way have you gone to obtain a car that you've wanted?
So I'm fortunate enough to know people in the States. So sometimes I've get them delivered to. I've bought from US sellers and got them who maybe won't deliver internationally, and got them delivered to a friend, taken up into the exchange rate as well. How far have I gone? It depends what you're talking about. I mean, sometimes it's a waiting game. So sometimes I've waited a few years for the right thing to come up. Sometimes I've maybe paid over the odds to get the right thing. Or sometimes, I've had to do a global sort of search.
Which car did you have to chase the most? Like, which car in your collection either waiting for or had to connect with the most people? Like, which one gave you the best chase? Like, the best chase?
The blue Camaro I showed you before is very, very elusive. Hardly ever comes up for sale. It's Corgi 304, if anybody's interested. So that's been hard to chase. And like I said, the last one I paid top money for, probably about the right price. Funnily enough, another one is a Matchbox model of a Charger dragster, which is not particularly accurate. I've not got it in a box, but I've got 3 different color variations now. And it's taken 3 years to collect 3 of those because they're so scarce when they come up.
Right.
Just so that is a waiting game. But the thing is, I think you've just got to be prepared to be patient.
Right.
There's other ones which are completely elusive that I should have bought and didn't back in the time. So
the one that got away, let's hear it.
Ascona you see here, I mean, that's a Sunstar 118 model, highly, highly detailed opening features, the engine detailed on it. You'll pay north of sort of £80 for that if one comes up for sale. I got that when it was a relatively new model. I mean, that's one of the Ascona Opel, synonymous in rallying, was a favorite of mine, and the road car again, because that was something that you might be fortunate enough to see when you were growing up. Somebody driving on the road. So I'd rather, for me, having that as a road version rather than rally livery was more important to me because it's rarer.
Right.
Yeah.
I like the detail in the engine.
Yeah, they're pretty cool. And these, I mean, when they're new, these cars probably about £45, but they're producing such limited quantity. There's so much deleted as soon as they're released. So then you're talking they sort of instantly sort of double, triple in value. And you've got people like us chasing them because of the limited quantity. Yeah.
Right. Do any of the models that you own have electricity? Meaning, like the blinkers turn on, the dome lights turn on, or something?
No.
Is that something you see in any models, or no? That's not common to that.
I know some people do it. That's not something that is important to me at all. I mean, I will collect things for different reasons. So, it might be that, I wanted a model of an Ascona 400, and then I decide to go off on a tangent and I'll buy certain things, or I might want to sort of, we know that Corgi have done various RS Cosworth, or Hot Wheels even do various versions of a particular Charger. I mean, the cool thing about Hot Wheels is when they first release a new casting, they tend to be pretty accurate with the color and the liveries. And then
Okay.
after they've released 2 or 3, then they start doing all their wacky colors and things like that. But you know, initial release Hot Wheels are more important to me. I mean, they've done some really cool American cars in the last 10 years, in like Barracudas and things like that. Just
Right.
recently, they've done a lot more cool European cars, like Golf GTIs. Audi Sport Quattro is one that springs instantly to mind.
Hmm.
Um, you know, they tend to be quite accurate. I mean, I've got I've got a small Hot Wheels here, which I got fairly recently. Extremely rare French-built Hot Wheels Fiat Strada Abarth. You know, people may or may not know what that is. 2 liter
That's great.
engine from Fiat, which is used across Alfa, Lancia, and Fiat. That car cost me £6 posted. It's in, I would say, very, very good condition.
Hmm.
Look on eBay now, and anybody, you know, you will not be able to find that car
Yeah.
in big supply. That was luck, pure luck, that one. But
Yeah.
I was looking at the right time, and you know, I mean, it's a pretty accurate representation. To say it was, I think, what's it saying the base, 1982. That's a pretty accurate representation of the real car in an accurate color with as accurate a striping as they could get, you know, 37 years ago. So
Is there
yeah,
a
that became
different?
that was an obsession. Then to, it's like, wow, this is, I've got to find one, and I did, and I just got lucky.
Right. Is there a difference, Paul, in the what we see when we look at these cars is obviously the exterior.
Yeah,
We see the paint, we see the outside, we see the livery. Is there any
yeah,
difference in the interior of these cars? Maybe as you go into different scales of cars, or all of the
yeah,
interior
yeah.
is
I
basically
mean,
the
that
same
one
material?
there, the Sunstar Ascona there has got I mean, obviously, I wasn't able to photograph the interior, but that's got very accurate interior colors and striping. I mean, those cars came with big Opel logos all the way through the fabric, and that is accurately represented in that model right there.
But that's
Some of the
plastic; it's not fabric, right?
no, it's plastic. I mean, you know,
Right.
I mean, sometimes that, you know, companies do make them with fabric interiors, but
Right.
I think collectors like me, it's not necessarily that important to have a fabric interior. It's more the representation, how accurate it
Right.
looks. And you know, if you're talking things like the, you know, go back to the, I'll use this Cosworth as an example. You probably can't really see there, but in there,
Right.
you know, it's got a sunroof. You can see the seats are sort of the Recaro buckets that car would have. The dashboard is
Right.
very accurate to a Sierra dashboard. You know, the badging is exactly how it should be, the proportions, etc. So, you know, they've with modern plastics, I mean, they can make things look very, very close to what in miniature to how they would have been, you know, really. So,
Yeah, we're looking at pictures of the inside of the Ascona model right now.
yeah,
I mean, that's just great. That the detail there is incredible.
yeah, you know, yeah. I mean, that's what you pay the money for
Yeah.
yeah, an accurate representation of a car like that. That's just a version of the rally. You know, like I said, one of the rally versions. I mean, some people collect those. For me, like I said, my motorsport passion in the main is collecting road versions of motorsport cars. Occasionally, I will collect one with
Right.
racing livery. Yeah,
It's great.
and that you know, those Opals like this came in so many different liveries. If you remember, the dealer team Opel cars had like a yellow and black livery, driven by some pretty famous European rally drivers. This mobile car, I remember this racing back in the day. These are readily available on eBay. In fact, if you type in Ascona 400 by Sunstar, you're more likely to come across a racing liveried version like this than you are the road car which you showed earlier.
Let me ask you a question. Now, this is more of a personal preference on your end here. If you see a car, and if we go back one, say
Yeah,
we see a car like this driven by a, the driver and the team and so on, and then maybe the next year the livery slightly changes. Are you collecting because you enjoy that team and you'll get every version of that car that driver has raced for that team? Like you'll get every model, or having one model for that car and team for you personally is enough? Are you like, okay, I
so
have it, I'm good, or you'll get every one?
Yeah, for me, no, but I know people who do. For me, it's more about the variations of that car that there's, if it's a road going version of that motorsport inspired car.
Right.
But no, I mean, like I said, my passion first and foremost is not collecting every single racing livery. It's not like collecting football shirts where there's a new one every single season.
Right.
Well, for me, you see this car here, the road version of the Manta 400 homologation car. You know, this was rallied after the Ascona. This is one that succeeded the Ascona. This car was a road car of extremely limited quantities because they had to be homologated, which meant they had to put so many on the road, as you
Right.
know. So this, to me, is a more interesting vehicle than the umpteen rally versions with the striping and the numbers on it that you could
Right.
get of this vehicle, because this car exists as a road car because of motorsport,
Right.
and you could buy it off the dealership floor, and that, to
That's
me,
great.
is where just like you could with the Charger and all those other, the things we were talking about before. It's a race-inspired road car that had to be homologated as a, this particular Manta here. In fact, funnily enough, I've got it's the guy I was telling you about in Scotland who restores cars. He's restoring one of these Mantas for me at the moment, and making it like this car here with the 4 headlights. And so he's taken the Revel model, and this car, you can't see the registration plate there, but this was the director of GM in the UK and Ireland. This was his personal car back in
Oh,
the
wow.
late 80s, sorry, early 1980s.
That's
The
great.
car recently sold at auction, I think, well, I might be wrong here, but I think for about 70 or 80,000
Wow.
pounds. Not with that many miles on it, but this particular Manta 400 homologation car in silver was a personal car of somebody who worked for Vauxhall Opel here
Right.
in the UK.
That's great.
But yeah, these cars, you could order these cars off the dealership floor, just like
I'm
you
going to
could,
start, I'm
you
going to
know,
pick up the pace, and not because
yeah,
I'm not interested, but because I'm looking at our time
yeah.
and I wanted to. This is gorgeous. This one.
So yeah, I mean, the Commodore was a luxury coupe here in
Jeez.
Europe, built in Germany, but a successful touring car as well. I mean, Andy Rouse raced these
Right.
in the mid-70s. I think I sent you some pictures of that. So a car that was a personal luxury coupe to the man on the street, but also was very, very successful in racing. Never really available. You could get it with sort of striping. I mean, this is like more of a personal coupe type, black vinyl roof and stuff. But these are available with, racing stripes, etc.
Right.
In fact, people in the Europeans in the mainland Europe tended to get a lot more interest in cars than we did in the UK.
Right.
We had the occasional GM that was nice, and Ford did a few nice ones for us. But in Europe, you had a much more choice of the type of crazy colours and whatnot you could get with these cars back in the 70s.
This is really, really
These now
nice.
very, very sought after cars. Still available, but very, very sought after for the real deal.
Excellent. Paul, let me ask you, as we unfortunately have to start winding down, and I'm sure people want to know, are you, and I guess this is what people are thinking, and it would be based on your answer here. Are you collecting based on your personal connection with a car and your interest in a car? Or are you collecting
Yeah.
based purely on increasing the value of what you have? Like, are you trying
Uh,
to create the most valuable car collection? Are you just or are you collecting because you say I have a connection to that car because I have a memory of it this way, and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
why I want it?
yeah, absolutely. So the monetary value is, I don't trade. I've only very, very rarely I'll sell a model, and sometimes it's been to fund another one. But
Right.
if I could sort of say, right, so this car here, this Alpha 155, I used to have one of these about 20 years ago from
That's
new.
great.
Um, these cars were very, very successful in British touring car racing.
Yep.
I tend to try and have a 1-1 version of every single car I've ever owned. So that to me was important to have that, which then drove me to buy the HPI Racing very, very limited version of the Twin Spark touring car. And I mean, this is one, if everybody
I
knows,
love it.
caused so much controversy about the spoiler and the splitter that was on it.
Yeah.
And they caused all sorts of rumpus in the racing world, where the other teams tried to get them banned. Funnily enough, it wasn't the splitter which was causing them to win at all. It was the fact that the engines were far superior, and
Yeah.
everybody was going off like trying to say the front splitter was far too big, and they even homologated this car. You could buy off the dealership a Twin Spark 155 with the spoiler kit in the boot and everything. They just threw them in there with the kit to say, well, yeah, we've homologated the car. You can create it yourself, sort of thing. When really it was just, they just shoved parts in cars on the dealership floor so that they could actually push that car onto the racetrack.
Right.
The most successful touring car for 2 years running. Now, the Alpha 155 I had was the later version, which was inspired by all of the things they learned in racing from that black car that I just showed you. There,
Right.
I mean, the red version of that is what Tarquini drove to win the 94 and 95 BTCC. So,
Right. Right.
and there's racing imitating then what was put back into production.
Right. Paul, as I expected, I feel like we're just like at the tip of the iceberg here. And it's like I look at the clock, and like we have 50 minutes that have gone by, and it feels like it was 3 minutes. But this is a passion that I feel a little bit bad cannot be kind of portrayed or even described in the time that we've spent here. It's so deep, it's so massive, and it's great. Let me ask you a question. If For people who want to start collecting,
Yeah.
right, and not do something foolish, because some people might say, you know what, I have the money, I'm just going to go buy the most expensive model and whatever. If people want to start to build a meaningful car collection, that's something that they're going to look back on.
Yeah.
Please give some advice there to those people that want to maybe start pursuing this.
I would say just collect what you like.
Yeah.
And see where it goes from there, because it will definitely go somewhere tangential at some point for whatever reason. So for me, like I said, it came from having a passion about cars that we grew up with that were probably connected by motorsport. I'll show you one last car.
Yeah.
Sierra Cosworth here.
Oh.
Now, this model is about 30 years old. These are dealer promo models. I only found out about them about 5 years ago. And these are made in Germany. They're metal. They're probably not the best built, but they're pretty accurate. But, that is something that I've always been into. Ford Sierras, and I've got various models. But then that was something like when I knew that they were available on the dealership floor.
Right.
When you something that's you then go and seek it out, because that's historically important. It was a of a car made at the time to put in dealerships when people were buying that car new because of the motorsport inspired version.
Right.
So that's what I mean by tangential. You could say, right, I'm going to start collecting X, and then you find out as you dig deeper, as with anything, and so you pursue it.
Excellent. Paul, before we go, I'm going to give you a chance to give some shout outs. Those people that maybe you trade with, or anyone you like, people supporting you. Go ahead. You have the floor.
Yeah. Oh, gosh. My friend Lee in Scotland, who is my partner in crime. We don't see each other that often, but we're both passionate and we trade lots of info on cars. All the community we've built on Twitter. So, and I can't even remember everybody, but We Love Diecast, Collector Maniac, Marcus Ward, who is an excellent artist, digital artist, and anybody else who, the Spa Fixer is another guy. I'm trying to remember all the names of their Twitter handles, but if I've not mentioned you, I'm still thinking about who you are. But we've got a great community on Twitter where we share lots of car knowledge. It's the models are the hub, but really we're sharing stuff that's historic. We're sharing car chat. We're sharing, old movies, brochureware, whatever it. Just get involved. There's something for everybody, which is really, really cool.
And I definitely want to take a second just to show the Diecast Addicts website. And here we go. This is where you share everything. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
it's so
we
deep.
have regular. We try and share things every day, and I mean, we have various days where we'll do certain things as well. And you build a community and followers by just sharing interesting content. And there's a lot of people out there with really really interesting content.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, I'm learning every single day as well. So and there's some great people out there, all with a passion for this for something automotive, and that's the place to find those people. So yeah,
that's great.
get involved, share the knowledge.
Excellent. Paul, thank you very much for
Thank
joining
you.
me for this
Thank
broadcast.
you.
I can't thank you enough for taking the time and sharing all the pictures and even taking some cars out of the box, which you shouldn't have done. But I really, really appreciate it. This is the type of discussion I really look forward to having again. I hope you would be up for joining me again in the future.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I'm sure there'll be other people who want to get involved as well. I mean, like I said, some of the people I know who do art, especially car art and racing car art, I think would
Right.
be really, really interesting to talk to as well. So,
Good stuff. Thank you again. And
yeah,
thank you to all the viewers. Appreciate you joining me for this segment. As always, this broadcast will be uploaded to the Flying 180 Motorsports YouTube channel, and we hope to see you again real soon. Hope everyone has a great evening. Thank you very much. Good night.